Hello, welcome to this episode of the Dharma Gates podcast. Today I will be interviewing Tejadhammo Bhikku from Wat Marp Jan. And the Dharma Gates podcast is going to be a series of interviews with monastics, teachers, practitioners from different Buddhist communities and lineages, sharing about their particular flavors of practice, their experiences, and hopefully providing some sense of what's out there, possibilities for deeper practice and training in the Buddhist tradition. We'll also be having some interviews about issues of young people in the Dharma, the future of Buddhism, and deep meditation generally. So in this interview, I'm really delighted to be talking to Tejadhammo Bhikku from Wat Marp Jan, where I had the pleasure of living very nearby this last summer. I wasn't actually staying at the monastery because I was working remotely for Dharma Gates, but I was able to go many times during the day. Wat Marp Jan is a monastery in the south of Thailand in the forest tradition of Ajahn Chah. And today, Tejadhammo Bhikku will be sharing a bit about his practice and experience in training and the monastic life in the Ajahn Chah tradition. So without going on too much longer, we can get into some questions, but thanks so much for taking a little bit of time to join me at, I think it's 5:45 a.m. there. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe we can start with the relatively, I think it's the first question in every Dharma podcast ever, which is how did you connect to practice, and how did you more particularly find yourself in robes and where you are right now in Thailand?
Yeah, of course that story can be told in different versions, longer or shorter. But I think what it began with for me was just a period of a lot of suffering as a teenager. Perhaps a lot of people could relate to that, but yeah, it was just for reasons I won't get into too much. But yeah, just a lot of suffering, especially around the age of 16. And there was this, of course, this natural sense of I want to, not suffer. I want to get out of this suffering, but I didn't know how to. And at the time, I didn't have a religion. I didn't have like a belief system that I really ascribed to. And then a friend of mine actually recommended reading the Tao Te Ching, which is, and I'm not pronouncing it correctly, but it really just struck a chord in my mind, in my heart. And then fortunately, my father had a lot of Buddhist books on the bookshelf there that I hadn't read, but I picked one up. I think it was called Seeking the Heart of Wisdom, and it included some meditation instructions within the book. And so just based on reading that, I started meditating every day. And just that, maybe it was 5 to 15 minutes in the morning or evening, but just doing that little bit of meditation based on the instructions in the book. There were some, I wouldn't say it's every time for sure, but there were some experiences of, peace that was more peace than I had felt previously, or it was very impactful, very memorable feelings of peace and serenity. And so, especially in contrast to such a big amount of suffering that I was experiencing at the time, that really motivated me to keep trying meditation. And I actually really enjoyed the learning about Buddhism, because my father had books from all the different traditions, so I kind of enjoyed that intellectual aspect as well at that time. Nowadays, more focused on doing the actual meditative training aspect of Buddhism. But at that time, I read a lot, and eventually went on a day-long retreat in Boston. I was living near Boston, and that again, each event felt like a very big impact on the mind. Felt very like it really kind of touched my heart deeply, these different things. And then eventually I came across this article in a magazine about a program where you could ordain for a month at the Gampo Abbey, which is a Tibetan monastery in Nova Scotia. And just seeing people in robes and hearing that it was possible to sign up to ordain myself, even though it was a temporary program, I just immediately felt like, oh, I really want to do that. It's just, it wasn't, and it wasn't something I really questioned, or I didn't wonder, like, why do I have this impulse or desire to do it? It was just like, oh, I really want to do it. And so I just signed up. And it was actually during that month-long retreat as a Tibetan monk. And it was all for young people, actually. It was called a youth datun, so it's only for young people, like 18 to 35, I think it was. And it was actually during that retreat, there was some kind of experience during meditation where what happened was I just felt like, oh, there's nothing left for me in the world. All I want to do is, train my mind, and I just want to be a monk the rest of my life. But the teacher on that retreat actually advised me to finish college first, because I just turned 18, just finished high school, so I hadn't done any college. And I had faith in the teacher on that retreat, so I basically just followed her advice, and toured some Thai monasteries during my third year of university, including Wat Marp Jan, where I live now. So I toured, because actually I knew already since I was maybe 17 that I wanted to go to Thailand. Again, it's a bit of a long story, but basically I saw a picture of Ajahn Chah in a book, and there's just this feeling of like, oh, he's my father in the Dhamma. Like, that's how I would verbalize it. It was just a very strong feeling. So I felt like, oh, I really want to go to where he lived, which of course is in Thailand. And and I just knew I wanted to go to Thailand, and knew I wanted to live in the Thai forest tradition. So eventually, during college, I studied Thai, and then ended up going to Thailand and touring a bunch of different monasteries, basically all in the Ajahn Chah lineage. And that's where I met Ajahn Anan, who's the abbot of Wat Marp Jan. And again, I think a lot, like a theme in the story, is there's just a lot of these like impactful moments that are sort of beyond like verbal or beyond sort of normal thinking. But when I first met Ajahn Anan, I was actually just washing a cloth on the ground, like a foot cloth, and he just walked up to me and gave me a teaching. There's no introduction. I'd never met him, and he had, never met me, or at least in this life, but he just gave this teaching, and there's this instant feeling of just the mind just went completely silent and peaceful. And I just felt like, oh, he's my teacher in this lifetime. And so that feeling never really left, that feeling that he's my teacher. And that was when, I guess that would have been 2006 or 2007. So almost 20 years ago now, 19 years. But I ended up finishing college, and actually went on to do a master's in counseling, because that was something that interested me. So basically I did like live as a lay person for a while. I didn't actually go straight away to ordain. I got married and had a job and things like that. But back in, I guess it would have been 2016, I sort of was starting the preparations to come ordain here, and then 2017 ordained here. But to answer the question, like why would I come live this way, which is, a bit of an unusual thing for someone to do. It was really like that feeling that from that Tibetan monk experience. Oh yeah, there's like I just felt like there was nothing else in the world that interested me. I just wanted to train the mind, and it was really stemming from a desire to benefit all beings. Like that was really the driving force of feeling like, how, and that was just a question since I was a little kid, like, how can I most benefit the world, most benefit beings? It was just like, just how I'm conditioned, I suppose. But um, that was just a question that drove like everything I did, of like, how can that be accomplished? But I felt like I found, for me, I'm not saying for everybody, but for me, I found the answer in terms of like, oh, I realize if I can train my mind well and sort of understand, what's beneficial, what's not beneficial, how not to suffer, I can, that benefits myself. And through that, I can also benefit others. So anyway, so that was really the real like driving force there. Yeah, and I, of course, I really like it. I love living this way, actually, and I love living in this particular location at Wat Marp Jan in Thailand. So that's why I'm still here. 8 years later, or I arrived to ordain almost exactly 8 years ago in a month or so.
Hmm.
I mean,
Yeah,
I could
thank you.
fill in more details if you want. I could just go on and on, but yeah, that's the
Well, thank you for sharing. It's really it's very interesting to hear that the Vajrayana was your touch point that kind of introduced you to the Dhamma, and also that kind of motivation to be a benefit to all beings is the sort of the inspiration for the kind of Theravada ordination. Because I think oftentimes we have this idea of them being the sort of bodhisattva vow and the kind of Theravada practice being these discrete categories. And if I always find it very interesting when practitioners are holding those two in 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 uh, in nuanced ways. Yeah.
right. Yeah, no, thank you for pointing that out, because I think it's just it's just my life that I live. So to me, it's normal, right? It's just
Mm.
the water I swim in. But yeah, now that you mention it, yeah, I do realize, oh yeah, it's in the beginning I didn't actually have much of understanding of how that's held in the Thai forest tradition, which is that's what you call the tradition that I'm in, Thai forest tradition. But especially living with Ajahn Anan, who I would say is particularly open to these different traditions and kind of has these strong, sort of, you could say, Mahayana or Bodhisattva connections, as well as, of course, the Theravada connections. But just living here for years now, you hear about all these different, yeah, famous monks or famous practitioners that are well known to be bodhisattvas, in the Thai tradition, and uh, and just the way it's held here, yeah, it's really, I think it's a bit of a Thai cultural thing of like the Thai culture. It tends to be, I would say, very positive and very kind of, yeah, welcoming of anything that's like good and positive. So I think Bodhisattva is very much, you know, kind of at the pinnacle of what's good. And so, yeah, there's just that sense of like, oh, yeah, if you want to build parami, build your spiritual qualities to benefit all beings, as a bodhisattva, they say, oh, sadhu. It's like, oh, if you want to end suffering, which is also considered to be very beneficial to everyone as well, they, oh, sadhu. And there's just this, uh, and just, I guess it feels very normal, particularly with Wat Marp Jan and Ajahn Anan. There's even like a bodhisattva temple here, which is unusual for a Thai Theravada monastery. So it's a bit more like overtly open to different traditions here.
Yeah, I loved practicing at that Guanyin temple that's at Wat Marp Jan, and also I found it was really beautiful that in the evenings a lot of the bhikkhus go in and chant these Mahayana chants. I was like, oh, this feels like a. I mean, I have a lot of resonance with both sides, with the Theravada and the Mahayana as well. So I found it really powerful. Mm.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think it's good to, or at least for me, it's very helpful for my mind to to be here with, in the Theravada context, of course, but having this more openness.
Mm.
Not that other places aren't open. I think there's a lot of openness in Thailand. I don't know about other Theravada traditions so much through direct experience, um, but also what Ajahn Anan says directly. He says, "Oh yeah, there's no Theravada, there's no Mahayana. It's all empty." He's saying, it's all Buddha. Buddha is empty. Emptiness is Buddha, and it's not two things. Buddha is Buddha. And I just like the way he just very overtly points out that, um, he's saying, like, every Buddha has to build their qualities as a bodhisattva to reach Buddhahood. So every Buddha was a bodhisattva, and you can see that, they're not, like, it's not really so different. Of course,
Mm.
we can get into like the conventional sort of, there's some differences on the conventional level, but he's pointing
Mm.
out that more ultimate side.
Yeah, beautiful. I'd be curious to turn a little bit more to the training at Wat Marp Jan and the form of practice there in particular, and in the Thai forest tradition in general. I'd be curious what your experience has been like, and also what's the core focus. I know about the training rules and the meditation as being the sort of core pillars, but maybe you could share a little bit more about what that's meant in your experience.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, um, well, there's kind of the experience as a monastic here versus as a visitor coming to practice will be different, of course. I mean, I can speak a little bit about the monastic side because, some people might be interested in that for different
Mm.
reasons. But just to give a kind of broad sense of it, for those that don't know, the Theravada tradition, which is what we call this, it means the way of the elders, and so that's the tradition primarily found in um, Thailand and other Southeast Asian countries. And it's a bit of a focus on, keeping the rules that are found in the Pali Canon, which is considered to be the texts that come from the time of the Buddha. So kind of like living the way they did at the time of the Buddha, keeping all the rules from the time of the Buddha. And so that's what you'll notice, some of the overt differences between this tradition and, like other traditions, like different Mahayana or Vajrayana traditions. So there's that aspect. So if one were if one's wanting to train as a monastic, then there's some kind of there's a lot of external differences on that level. In terms of the teaching, again, you'll get different kind of flavors, different emphases from different teachers. Like with Ajahn Anan, it's coming from the Ajahn Chah. His teacher is Ajahn Chah, who's a well-known Thai forest master. And I would say the emphasis in this tradition, a lot of it comes from the teachings of Ajahn Chah, and also in the lineage of Luang Pu Man or Ajahn Man, who is a Thai forest master from, you would say, the generation before Ajahn Chah, I think you could say. Um, so there's a sense of simplicity, a sense of um, just coming back to real basics, like the way Ajahn Chah would teach. Not that I'm an expert, but from what I can remember, just teach like something like, have mindfulness. Be mindful throughout the day and all your activities. And and like something Ajahn Anan will often say is, contemplate. Just contemplate what you're experiencing. Have mindfulness. So there's a sense of, and that's quite brief, as you can tell. It's just a couple of sentences, but there's that sense of just the simplicity, coming back to basics. And the great masters, they do give long talks, for an hour, 2 hours. So it's not like they don't elaborate on these things, but it's not so much like a study tradition. Like monks can study, we do study sometimes. It's more of an individual choice at Wat Marp Jan particularly, but I would say the Ajahn Chah and the Ajahn Anan lineages. Yeah, it's more about actually looking at your own mind, looking at your own heart, and sort of learning from your experience, like learning from the book of your own mind, as opposed to, focusing a lot on, like memorizing or looking at texts and so on. Like we do memorize a lot of chants. That's a big part of our, especially as monastics, a big part of our practice is chanting. But I'd say, yeah, the emphasis is on, yeah, really training your mind, looking at your mind, and really understanding, like, well, how do I actually not suffer? How do I actually, cultivate wholesome qualities, abandon unwholesome qualities? What does that really look like in a very practical way? Yeah, so that's a bit of a broad overview. Is there any kind of particular aspect that you'd like to highlight?
Well, I think one thing I've been struck by in spending a bit of time in Asia and visiting a few Theravada monasteries was I had never realized that the life is actually there's something very beautiful about. Yeah, I guess you spoke to the simplicity, but you really receive your meal and then you have a little hut in the forest and you just practice most of the day, and it's very very spare, but I found the sort of deep, it's almost a deep endless nature immersion quality that I was like I hadn't fully realized that that was the experience, and I connected to it in a different way through that, uh, somehow through that. And so I'd be curious what you'd share about, like, what's it actually like living at the monastery, and what's the the daily routine, and um, how does that play into the practice that you're describing?
Right. Yeah. No. Good question. Yeah. Again, after living here some years, I think I'm very used to it, so it doesn't necessarily uh, like I don't think about it so much. But it's true that being in nature is, yeah, it's a kind of prominent aspect. It's called the Thai forest tradition. So that sense of, and also looking back at the Buddha's historical story, born in the forest, enlightened in the forest, passed away into final nibbana in the forest, and living, you know, most of his monastic life, or his life as an ascetic as well, in the forest or in nature. So there's definitely that is a big part of it, and even they call it a forest monastery. So yeah, you're in the forest just all day, all night, you know, and and there's that sense of learning from nature. Again, that simplicity, that sense of, um, like for instance, like looking at a leaf fall, which happens year round here because of, in the tropics, and just looking at a leaf fall, you can see, oh yeah, like life is uncertain. Life ends in death, and if you really see that clearly, you could realize, enlightenment, see the Dhamma, from such these little simple things, or you see, um, just like little things like the weather changes, or like an animal's died on the side of the road, or a flower blossoming, what have you. There's that sense of, yeah, you're living in nature and you're learning from it in whatever way you do. It just arises naturally when you live in the forest all the time, that you can just learn. Um, and I think the simplicity helps. Yeah, like we do the alms round, or maybe I'll do a little bit more of the full schedule. So yeah, we wake up, 3 or 4 a.m., something like that. 5 a.m. is the morning chanting. Then we do the alms round, which is a traditional practice, particularly in this Southeast Asia part of the world. So, we carry the alms bowl and people put food in the alms bowl, and that's our food for the day. I mean, people also come to the monastery and give food here at the monastery. But yeah, and then in this tradition, customarily we eat once a day in the morning, and then after that have a bit of free time, after cleanup, and then you really, yeah, a lot, sitting and walking meditation in a, maybe, yeah, 10 foot by 10 foot or 2 or 3 meters by 2 or 3 meters hut, and usually, and that's, in the forest with a walking path in the forest, and yeah, so I think you can really get this sense of simplicity, like you finish all your eating uh, just once, and then the rest of the day you're kind of free. You don't have to think about food or deal with that, and just having a solitary dwelling in the forest. And then we have communal chores. So I'd say this tradition, there's also a strong sense of community events like morning and evening chanting or community chores. So even though it is a solitary life, it is a celibate life, there's also a sense of, yeah, like doing things with the community, like again, the group chanting or the chore period, like a lot of sweeping or other kinds of cleaning tasks. And then there's like an afternoon drink, since we don't eat food in the afternoon, but we can have things like fruit juice or yeah, different kinds of like teas or things like that. And then we have evening chanting about 7:15 p.m. until 9 p.m. or later. And sometimes people stay up all night meditating to practice, yeah, not lying down. But the kind of group meditation usually ends around 9 p.m. So that's like a rough sense of what the day looks like. But yeah, I think you can probably get a sense of simplicity, and it does help, I think, to, yeah, find some peace, because you're in the forest, and your chore usually, especially in the beginnings, more like sweeping, very simple, uh, and also, yeah, just getting some physical activity. And there's just a sense of, yeah, learning from your basic experience, like, just, yeah, one foot steps in front of the other. The wind blows, the clouds come, the mosquitoes bite, the mosquitoes go. And, you just learn from these really just basic experiences. But if you look closely at them, you can really learn a great deal. Like I was saying before, yeah, and Ajahn Anan teaches you can really see the Dhamma from such simple things. Or you see like a mosquito, there's a lot of mosquitoes, generally speaking, here. And, if a mosquito bites you, yeah, it's people experience that as unpleasant, right? You don't like it. You don't want that experience. And if you just look closely at that, you say, oh, this is unpleasant. Like, I don't want this. I don't like this. But of course, we practice not to kill, not to harm living beings. And so you find, well, because you're sitting meditation a lot of the time, there's no way to avoid the mosquito. Like, once it's biting you, like, you're not going to get up and run away. So, you'd really just can only just let it bite you at that point. But I think for me to, you look at it and you just learn, oh, right, this is the experience of unpleasantness. And then there's this disliking. Oh, you don't like that. You don't want that. And you can see, oh, like suffering is arising through this like craving not to experience this or this aversion. And then you also see the craving arises and ceases. The unpleasantness arises and ceases. The mosquito comes and goes. And yeah, something so simple, but if you really look closely, and then that just basic experience, you can learn so much. Like then when someone comes and criticizes you or says something that you feel like is mean or cruel, or even extend it further, like someone you love dies, like you've already trained your mind to understand the principles of attraction and aversion, pleasant and unpleasant, gain and loss. And so you really strengthen your mind greatly through these really simple things. And another thing that I really enjoy about this lifestyle is there's a lot of bowing. So when we enter or leave our dwelling, yeah, I think right? So you bow, you enter or leave the shrine and you bow. you bow to anyone senior to you as a monastic. Of course, as a lay guest, like no one forces you to bow, but the Thai people, the Thai culture, there's a lot of bowing to anyone, like higher in the hierarchy, or bowing to monastics, bowing to the shrine. But anyway, I find that again that really helps to teach letting go. You just sometimes you have the sense of like, I don't want to bow, or maybe there's someone you don't like, and you feel like, oh, I don't want to bow to this person that I don't like, but then you do it anyway, and there can be this really beautiful sense of just humility, letting go of the sense of self, and it's just these little basic things, um, shaving the head every 2 weeks, which we do, just not just that sense of simplicity, not having so much hair, wearing the same clothes every day. So there can be a lot of joy of renunciation as well, which I think is not, I think sometimes renunciation, maybe it has a negative perception for some people, can have like, oh, renouncing, it sounds like not the most fun thing, sounds like you have to give up things you like, or doesn't necessarily sound joyful to everyone, from what I understand. But for me, I'm not saying it was easy. Like when I came to ordain, there was certainly a lot of grief, and there was a lot of pain in the mind to let go of people I cared about, possessions that I liked, my pets, things, there was a lot of attachment. So it was painful. But after that, sort of processing that, that's just that joy of renunciation, that joy of, oh, you don't have to, you don't have, you know, food in the afternoon. You don't have different clothing to wear. You don't have, hair, or you don't have to, even things like you don't choose so much like what you do. It's like, well, the chanting is what it is. And, as a monastic particularly, you don't, you're under the guidance of the teacher. So if you think, oh, I don't want to do chanting today, but maybe you do it anyway. You say, well, maybe I'd rather, go here or there, or do this or that. But you relinquish these things, and there can be a great sense of spaciousness and joy. And certainly, you don't have to be a monastic to feel that. I mean, you can feel that at home for sure. It's just a matter of the inner. It's a mental action, basically, of renunciation is what it really comes down to. It's an act of the mind, but doing the act on the external level, I think most people I know, or speak for myself, that was very helpful to tune into the inner renunciation. Because if I didn't give things up on the external level, I think it'd be harder to feel the inner renunciation. But of course, you can feel it to varying degrees, and in whatever context you're in. Certainly, coming on retreat, coming to the monastery. I think, at least for me, before I ordained, I would really enjoy retreat, partly for that reason. And I think a lot of people can relate to that. It's like a temporary renunciation, but there can be a lot of joy. You come to your retreat and you're like, oh, I don't have to deal with the job or the relationships or the possessions. It's just nice and simple. And I think a lot of people feel joy from that, or people that have done retreats can probably relate to that.
Yeah, thank you. I'd be curious. So I have a good friend who's planning to ordain shortly, in next month. And, we've talked for a few years. I've also considered ordination down the road, and just about the difficulties of the holy life, and also in Asia particularly, it's very hot. There's some dengue around, and the food can be difficult. And was that difficult for you? Was the actual experience of being in Thailand hard? And do you think it's possible for most people, or is it sort of a constitutional situation where some people can handle it and others find it tough. Um,
Yeah, no, good question. That comes up, or certainly, yeah, we have a fair number of Westerners. Um, I think it was implied, but I should mention, yeah, so I'm from the USA, and we have, yeah, a few others from the States, but really all over the world, including other Southeast Asian countries, other Asian countries, Australia, North America, Europe, sometimes South America, Central America. Um, yeah, not so much Africa, but sometimes. So anyway, so yeah, it's really all over the world, and particularly people from, yeah, the colder countries. Like myself, I grew up in the Boston area, and here in Thailand, like I mean, really the whole country is, yeah, quite hot compared to Boston area, and yeah, it can be difficult, and the food as well. Um, and I think, yeah, maybe just different combinations, yeah, when you combine the climate change, or the climate difference, the the different food, maybe some different indigenous viruses and bacteria that Western body's not used to. um, yeah, I mean, I found it personally very, very challenging, kind of like I was saying with the mosquito bite example, but a lot of unpleasantness to deal with. You're just feeling really hot like so much of the time, just like covered in sweat all the time, or having a lot of food poisoning, like that, and also adjusting to the culture can be quite challenging as well. Just not understanding what people are saying, not understanding cultural cues that like a native Thai person would understand. Um, I mean, that being said, the reason why I stuck it out, because it really took, I'd say, a full at least 12 months to adjust to the weather and the food. And that was quite, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of unpleasant feelings in the body, a lot of discomfort, very challenging as well, because when you're kind of exhausted from these other physical challenges, it can make working with the mind more difficult, or working, because as a full-time meditator, as a monastic, um, your happiness really comes from your meditation. It doesn't come from, enjoyable sights, sounds, taste, smells, touch, like, like before ordaining, you would have, maybe you could choose what you eat, and you could choose things you like, or you could, turn on a movie if you felt like it, or, you could leave the house and go do something that you enjoyed. But, like none of these like avenues are really available. I mean, to some degree, of course, you have some food selection options and so on, but basically, like you're kind of cutting off all these different avenues for the mind to go out into enjoying like objects of the senses. And so, really, primarily, this what I would say as a monastic, your happiness comes from your meditation. And so, and yeah, so just dealing with the five hindrances is quite important, or very important, and I think that's but yeah, anyway, when you have some kind of physical challenges, it can make that more difficult, I think. I mean, of course, even if you don't have any physical challenges, it's very easy to have a five hindrances anyway, so it's not like that's a deal breaker. But for me, the thing that kept me going, or there are a lot of things that kept me going, but I found the environment very supportive, even despite the heat and I had trouble digesting the food and so on. But I found the Thai people, the fellow Thai monks, just very forgiving and very kind. Like I would do a lot of things like inappropriate, like not like that, not that bad. I mean, but like just little cultural things I didn't understand, like where to put your shoes, or how to, you know, walk into a building in a way, these little things, and I would do them wrong, I think, a lot. But I noticed when people kind of pointed it out or corrected me, or people just seemed, just really kind and forgiving, didn't seem to hold it against me. And I mean, to this day, I probably still do things that maybe I don't understand all the cultural things, but I find that, the culture is very warm, very welcoming. There's a lot of, I'd say, generosity and kindness are very, like, palpable qualities of Thai culture, particularly, that I've found. Not saying other places aren't like that, but this is just the place that I know better. Um, and also, the faith in Ajahn Anan, the abbot, and he was and continues to this day to be very helpful. And especially in the beginning, if I had any kind of difficulty or a question, or he would just give me advice. And when I put the advice into practice, testing it out for myself, it really worked. It's like that sense of, I had enough faith to try it out. I had enough faith to listen to him and say, okay, I'm going to try that out. And after trying it out, it was like, oh, wow, this really helps me. This really helps me in my practice, or helps me not to suffer. And also, I think for me, this is I guess, my opinion, that it's more than just the teacher, but also the other members of the community are an important part of living as a monastic, because you're really living in this community with these other people all the time. But I found the other monks to be really supportive, and I feel like I've received a lot of great teachings from the other monks, as well as Ajahn Anan, but also nonverbal. Just sometimes you just see one of the fellow monks, and to this day this continues to be true. But I'll see someone, I think, oh, they're just so inspiring to me. Just their behavior, the way they conduct themselves, the way they keep showing up to things, or I can gain a lot of strength of heart, a lot of inspiration from these, not even interaction necessarily, but just just living with people. You really get to know them in that nonverbal way as well. But I think, certainly Ajahn Anan, as the leader of the community, I would say he's well known for having a lot of loving kindness, which to me is very helpful. They felt, very kind of, uptight or stressed or very tense. And so that quality of loving kindness, compassion, is something I aspire to cultivate. And he, to me, was a good, like a living example of that, but also his presence felt very helpful in that way. But also the wisdom, and particularly, I would say Ajahn Anan is very kind of broad in his skillful means that he teaches. And I find that's very helpful for myself. And I think also the diversity of the community, like I said, coming from all over the world. I think Ajahn Anand's kind of ability or openness to teaching in a kind of customized way, I think is probably one of the reasons why there's so many international community members. But I found it, just really helpful, where you kind of give like customized instruction, or open to different things. But I think, I mean, it did take some adjustment. Like I said, there was a lot of just sort of letting go, and some grief, and some just the pain of adjusting to so many differences. But there was also a great deal of happiness, like the happiness of the freedom and openness of this lifestyle, and just the happiness of being with my teacher that I respect so greatly, and putting his teachings into practice, and finding certainly not all the time, still dealing with hindrances, but certainly finding some peace of mind, at least sometimes, and some like inspiring or motivating experiences, you could say, in meditation. And I think that's also important, if one is to live this life over the long term, particularly. But I think, it really takes a combination of really applying oneself, cultivating the faith and wisdom and mindfulness, and also for myself and a lot of the other monastics I know, especially the spiritual friendship, the connection with the teacher, the connection with the fellow community members, incredibly supportive.
Yeah, thank you. That makes a lot of sense to me, that it's sort of there would be some difficulty in that first year, and also that you're sort of really leaning into the supports that are there as that's what makes it worth it, clearly. So it's possible. Um, I'm curious. I like to always been trying to ask this as the last question uh, in all the interviews I've done, which is for young people. Our audience is our intended audience is practitioners between 18 and 35. It's okay if anybody listens to this. This is not an exclusive podcast, um, but for people who are building a life and also exploring practice and also navigating the craziness of the world right now, which is just many things happening that are uh, make it difficult to plan or to know how to fully respond. What would you say? What would you recommend as orienting principles or guiding thoughts for someone in that process of discerning what is this Dhamma in their life, and also what should they do? Really?
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, these are very good questions, and I feel like, each question you ask, the answer could be, a couple hour answers. I'll do my best to to cover what feels important. I mean, I should, mention, I do feel a lot of, sort of sympathy or resonance with what you said, because, like I mentioned, I started meditating, started getting into Buddhism when I was 16, and I practiced, you know, I I tried to practice to the fullest of my ability, or wholeheartedly, throughout, until I was, as a layperson, until I was, I guess, ordained when I was 30. So it was really like, the whole of my, age 16 to 30, I was really trying to live the life that you're describing. So even though I'm a monastic now for the, past 8 years or so, but yeah, I have a lot of sympathy for that. Trying to practice as a young person, because that's what I was doing, for my uh, my life until I came here. I mean, still practicing, and still on whatever age I am as a monk, but it's different as a monk, because you have a lot of support. The lifestyle. It's like you basically, the monastic life. It's a container. It's the vinaya, the monastic discipline. It's a container that you choose to live within, because you find it supportive and helpful and conducive to, cultivating wholesome qualities, abandoning unwholesome qualities. And so one of the reasons I chose to live this life is because I found it, like, it suits me, and I find it helps me in my practice, and it helps me with what I want to do as well. Like I mentioned, like, I have the aspiration to benefit beings, but I felt like I should be able to understand how to benefit myself first. Otherwise, so that's kind of. But I feel like, this lifestyle, this container, I found it really helps a lot. So I feel like, in that sense, I can appreciate, comparatively, I do think it is more challenging living as a lay person, or people say, like, living in the world, or that we're all actually in the world. Just the monastery is just a different, uh, it's just a more kind of protected environment. But I think, there's that sense of, like, the current of the world, the flow of the world. Like, things are always trying to pull your attention, and like ads on the YouTube, or on the internet, or on the billboards. and like oh, there's some tasty food over here, or a nice new movie over there, and pleasant, you know uh whatever your personal thing is, like nice clothing, comfortable, you know cushions and bed and seats, but basically it's all like kind of pulling the mind into the world of sense experience, which well, you could fairly ask the question, like, well, what's wrong with that? Well, it's not wrong to have sense experience, of course, but I think from the Buddhist perspective, what you're looking at is suffering, how not to suffer, right? And and like the bodhisattva aspect, like helping others to not do that as well. But the issue with sense experience is, yeah, you start clinging to it, and it never gives a lasting satisfaction. And I think we all know that, like hearing that, it's like, oh, right, like of course, you know, but deep down, I think we have this sense of, oh, but that next thing, like I really need that next thing. Like all the trillions of past sense experiences never satisfied me, but like, this next meal or this next, experience, like I really need it. Like it's really going to do it for me. So I think we all have that, you know, unenlightened monastics included. But so I think, part of, for me, like practicing in the world or as a lay person would be, yeah, just tuning into Dhamma teachings on a regular basis to kind of just remind the mind of these things. Because I found, like, without reminders, it's very easy to start thinking in terms of, like, oh, like getting the pleasant thing, like really is what what will bring you happiness, or running away from the unpleasant thing really is what will make you happy, or these different things, like these like little attitudes, or not little, but these attitudes we have that can be very, just leading to a lot of suffering, just like kind of endless cycle of chasing after and running away, or being deluded by. So I find, I guess, yeah, just to give some kind of practical recommendation, yeah, I find, yeah, listening to some Dhamma, even just a little bit each day, or could, yeah, be reading. Reading's also fine, just to give the mind, yeah, it's like food for the heart, to give the mind some wholesome nourishment. Because, yeah, like sort of, yeah, just random, YouTube videos or different, things you see on the side of the road or what have you, it's more like junk food, or even like a poisonous food for the mind, in the sense that it might feel good in the moment, but um, it's not conducive towards this long-term sense of inner well-being or deep well-being. So yeah, I think listening to some Dhamma just to remind the mind of, like, oh, right, like, yeah, craving for these things is suffering, or like, oh, right, these things don't last. Everything, like, or like, oh, right, this body, like, is not mine. It's really like a thing of nature, and it's normal for it to get old, normal for it to get sick, normal for it to die, like normal to get separated from the loved. And these are really profound teachings, which is why I think we need to remember them very frequently, to let it really sink in. Because if it does actually sink in, you do gain a great deal of happiness and well-being. Like, it might not sound like a joyful thought to think, oh, like, I'm like, this body's, of the nature to age, sicken and die, and I'll be separated from everything that I love. These are like, and like, you're the heir to your karma. These are the 5 reflections. But if you really, like, let it into the heart, there's a sense of the mind starts to learn, like, oh, if this is how it is, yeah, like maybe I shouldn't cling to these things, or shouldn't cling so much, at least in the beginning. And that brings about a great sense of joy and well-being, and the sense of, like, inner peace and happiness. And when you tune into that, or speaking for myself, like tuning into that sense of inner well-being, there's this feeling of like, oh, right, this is what I've been looking for this whole time. This whole time I've been running around the whole world, running around, trying to get this or that, like this relationship, that relationship, travel into this country, this experience, this, super cool, spiritual experience, whatever it is. Which, it's like those things weren't inherently bad, but just finding that really deep wellspring of inner happiness and well-being, there's a sense of, oh, right, like this is what I've really been looking for this whole time. And then the more you practice, the more it deepens and deepens, and it gets more profound and more, more well-being, more happiness. But so I think listening to a bit of Dhamma each day. I mean, I think for myself, I really tried to make a very firm commitment to the 5 precepts just as a basic foundation. And this is a common teaching in this lineage, and Ajahn Anan says it very often. But 5 precepts, that's like your foundation, and then 8 precepts on top of that sometimes can really help with the meditation. Of course, if you want to do 8 precepts all the time, that can be great. But I tried to really set the 5 precepts as a really solid foundation, and just committing to, for myself, first thing, like as soon as I would wake up, maybe use the bathroom or splash some water on the face, but I would try to meditate first thing in the morning. I found the mind was a bit more clear after sleeping, and just to have that as a really consistent habit, like I think like maybe an hour and a half I would try to do, and maybe before bed as well. But I think ideally, I think 3 times a day, like a period in the midday, even if it's only a short time. But I think, just having those touchstones of just checking in. And I think for me to frame it as something that I was really doing as a gift to myself was very important. Because again, sort of like my character could be quite strict or kind of overly tense. So if I kind of framed it as like, I have to do this, and if I don't do this, like I'm a bad practitioner or like I'm a failure, like it just feel like it wasn't happy. Like it was too kind of tense like that. But if I framed it as like, I'm giving myself this hour and a half as a true gift for my own well-being and happiness, and I'd start out with some loving kindness for myself, and then whatever meditation object you're familiar with that you find works for you. But I found framing it in that way, like this is a time that's a gift to myself, that's I'm doing it to benefit the mind, benefit myself, and that really helped to feel this sense of like ease and relaxation and really enjoying it. Because if you don't enjoy it, it's going to be very hard to sustain. So I think there has to be that sense of like, oh, I'm actually really enjoying this. And particularly if the mind's very busy or you've had a busy day, I think we have, at least for myself, I think maybe a lot of people have this image of the sitting Buddha meditation statue, the Buddha sitting in meditation. So you think, oh, if I'm going to meditate, I have to sit and I have to be silent, and that's what meditation is. But I found particularly if the mind's busy or you've had a busy day, starting out with some walking meditation, walking back and forth, mindful of the steps. You can have a mantra, and also chanting. Chanting is a big part of what we do here. And it did, honestly, I think, as a part of the Western conditioning, like it just didn't feel like why are we making all these sounds with our mouths? I didn't really, I was like, can't we just sit silently? But then I really found I got really, to see the benefit of it, to see like, oh, it can really brighten the mind. It can really help the mind settle and also clarify the mind, because sitting in silence, I think it's easy for the mind to kind of think in almost a background way or an unseen way. Whereas when you chant, it really helps, I think, to clear the mind of the thoughts, and you just focus on the chant. So whether you do that for your whole meditation session, like you can walk for a whole hour, it's a very viable posture for meditation. But some people, they like to walk for 15 minutes or chant for 15 minutes and then sit afterward, and the mind's more still. But you can certainly chant and walk for as long as you find it helpful. But anyway, so there's a bit of practical things. And I mean, there's so much to say. Of course, the foundation of generosity. Also, I think probably not spoken about enough, at least for me. Because I find, again, it's just an easy way to bring the mind to joyfulness and brightness and letting go. And you don't have to be giving material things. It can be giving forgiveness, giving time, giving energy, giving kindness. But I think that the basic attitude of giving, I think the more I've practiced, the more I've lived as a monk, but also as a practitioner, I find that the fundamental attitude of generosity is really conducive towards peace of mind, which is, necessary for wisdom. Because I think we all want that pinnacle at the top, that beautiful pinnacle of shiny wisdom that liberates from suffering. It's very, that's the highest, the liberating wisdom. And so I think, those real foundations of giving, virtue, things like patient endurance, renunciation, they might not feel so flashy and attractive initially. But I think once you get to know them, you see, these qualities are really beautiful and really necessary to bring the mind to wisdom. I mean, of course, all the qualities I just mentioned, they involve wisdom. They're not actually separate. But if we look at them as separate, just for the sake of speaking about it, you can see these foundational qualities. There's a lot of happiness and joy, and a lot of wisdom and growth as well from them.
It's a wonderful answer. And I guess I'd like to move into just saying thank you for your time, and also if there's any way for people to plug into the Wat Marp Jan ecosystem or the Thai forest tradition. I know there's some monasteries in the U.S. And I think Wat Marp Jan has quite a few teachings online too. So maybe you could share a little bit about how is this tradition accessible to people?
Right. No. Good question. So there's a few ways. Probably I'll start with some of the easiest ways. So online, I imagine, you could get some links, but also if you just search Ajahn Anan or Ajahn Anan Dhamma on YouTube, there's a Thai language channel and an English language channel. And there's lots and lots of talks. The vast majority are from Ajahn Anan, but when we do retreats, sometimes we have other monks give talks as well. So those have also been translated into English. And those are also available, and there's hundreds, if not thousands, on there among a lot of different themes. So you can search for different themes as well. And watmarpjan.org is the website. And through the website, you can get the Zoom information, because the monastery, Wat Marp Jan broadcasts on Zoom. Every Friday, there's a video conference with a live question and answer session. But also, actually, currently, there's some kind of break due to some technical updates. But normally it's every night. There's evening chanting is broadcast. So 7:15 p.m. Thai time, depending on where you are, of course, about 7 a.m. in the U.S. And there's sometimes a Dhamma talk. These days, a lot of the time, it's a silent meditation. Once the chanting's over, 7:45 to 9 p.m. Thai time, silent meditation. So those are easy ways to tune in. You're also welcome to visit in person. So it might be a bit of a distance, but at least for myself, I remember my first visit was very impactful. And I think if you have the means or the possibility to meet some of these great masters in person, I do highly recommend it. for me, meeting Ajahn Anan, yeah, just a very deep impact on the mind. And even though I didn't see him for like many years, once I came back to the States after my first trip, like somehow the memory of having met him, it was just a really bright spot on the mind, and recollecting it gave me a lot of joy and happiness. So again, it's not necessary. You can, recollect Sangha from anywhere in the world, and you can tune in online. But yeah, if you do have the chance to come in person, I think, yeah, it can be nice. And yeah, of course, there's many Ajahn Chah, either direct branches or affiliated monasteries in North America, or, if you're listening from elsewhere, yeah, in Europe, there's a lot, in Australia. Wat Marp Jan itself, it has some international branches, especially Australia and Europe. North America, not a direct branch, but Ajahn Nisipho ordained with Ajahn Anan, and he has Clear Mountain Monastery in Seattle. And yeah, there's, of course, Abhayagiri Monastery was actually the first Thai forest monastery I ever went to in California. There's Jetavana Monastery in New Hampshire. And there's others that I'm not so familiar with, so I apologize, but they should be easy to find online. And yeah, so I think it can be nice just to kind of tune in. And I think, like the four pillars of the Buddhist community, like monks, nuns, female lay people, male lay people. Living as a monk, you could say I'm a bit biased, but I think there can be something nourishing about, tuning into the other pillars. Like even for me, like, I myself am ordained as a bhikkhu, but even when I see other monks, like it actually does inspire me, because I think, oh, right, here's someone, upholding, the celibate life, observing the discipline, meditating and chanting every day. And I do find that I think it can help. I forget who was saying it, but it's something like, like the defilements, they work full time. They don't take vacations, they don't take breaks. So sometimes I think it can help to tune into the monastic aspect of things, because the monastic life, it's a full-time thing. Like there's no such thing as like a day off from being a monk or a nun. So it's not that I'm not saying every monk is enlightened, of course, but I think there's that sense of just tuning into a broader sense of, oh, there are other practitioners in the world that are, kind of fighting against the defilements, or going against the current of craving and aversion and delusion. And I think that can be nourishing and helpful. And of course, yeah, it can be other lay practitioners as well. But I think, whatever you resonate with, I'd say, yeah, take advantage of that, whatever community you do find. Like for myself, of course I live at the monastery, but I find it helpful just to tune into the sense of, yeah, there's practitioners all over the world practicing. At any given time, there's people trying to cultivate, peace and wisdom and insight, and cultivate good qualities, abandon unwholesome qualities. And I do find that nourishing. Also, as an aside, like for those interested in ordination, I think similarly, like you find the community that you really resonate with, that you feel most at home with, just to kind of add to that previous question. I feel like that's an important aspect. And for me, that was very important. Just feeling at home, feeling like a connection with the teacher, with the community, especially for a long-term ordination. But I think, yeah, just, like just recollecting beings that you find inspiring. I think that's also it should not be overlooked. Like the Buddha, there's one teaching from the Buddha where he's saying, if you're literally like, holding on to his robe, but you have no mindfulness, you're far from the Buddha. But if you have good mindfulness, even if you're physically distant, then you're close to the Buddha. And I would say that, like with members of the Sangha or enlightened Sangha, or just fellow practitioners, if you have that good quality of mindfulness well established, you can feel a close connection, wherever you are. So I think it's important to know that that's possible, and also to kind of actively cultivate that mind state.
Wonderful. Well, we're a bit over the hour, so I think it's a good time to can kind of pause it here, and just want to say one more time thank you so much for calling in from Thailand, and I'm sure you have to go get food soon. Yeah. So
Yep. Yeah. Almost time for the meal. Yeah.
perfect. Well, it's really wonderful to talk to you, and I'll share a bunch of the links to the places, resources you mentioned in the video description, so folks can find it there.
Yeah. Yeah. And just really big satu and anamodana with all your efforts to, help people and, spread this information. So, yeah, I just want to say I wish everyone well in their practice and their journey, wherever it may take them or wherever they are. So, yeah, satu.
Sadhu. Great.